This is an important year for us to think about the past achievements, failures, lessons learned, and to plan our next 25 years of development. This is a very important time to evaluate all the opportunities and to engage you all in this very important development process for all of us. So let me start briefly telling you about economic outlook, and I will be brief enough to allow questions and answers session and to allow more time for answering questions. Our recent economic growth history tells us that we managed to have about 5% average growth rate during the last 10 years. We managed to have, to sign important agreements with European Union. This was association agreement, part of which was free trade area agreement, which we call deep and comprehensive free trade area agreement. I will mention about it later. We are in an important process to get visa-free travel right for Georgian citizens to Schengen zone, and for this we completed very ambitious reform agenda, fulfilling important requirements on institutional legislative changes. And also we have very important next 4 or 5 years reform agenda under the association agreement. I can say also that we have achieved important results in terms of improving Georgia's business environment. We are one of the best in the world according to our doing business rankings. We have very important changes going on in Georgia now, transforming Georgian institutional standards to the European standards, and changing Georgia's, actually not changing, let me say, strengthening Georgia's image internationally and strengthening perception about Georgia as of a European country. Georgia has been European. Georgia's DNA is European historically, culturally. Now our aim is to create institutional DNA of Georgia as of a European country. This is a very important process. This is a very painful process sometimes, but the commitment from the government of Georgia is very strong, and it will remain so in the next years. Now, I already mentioned about the growth rates, and 5.1% average growth rate during the last 10 years. This is very important because we have oil prices going down in the region. We have military conflicts in Ukraine, in Syria, and of course this all affects economic growth prospects. We are proud to say that in these circumstances we were able to manage to have this year above 4% growth rate forecasts. Yesterday EBRD released new forecasting 3.4% growth, but according to many other forecasts which was done in the private sector, also within the financial institutions, we will probably end up with higher than 4% growth rate this year. What are the key growth drivers for Georgian economy? As you can see, services is the main driver. It's above 30%, and I would like to mention in a couple words that under the services sector we have several champions of growth of Georgian economy. First of all, this is financial sector, and you all know that two of the Georgia's leading banks are already listed at London Stock Exchange, and they trade very successfully there. We have transport and communication sector, main driver of economic growth also because of our geographic location, because of important projects going on, which is the Southern Gas Corridor project, which is Silk Road project, giving additional momentum to our economic growth, and of course tourism and hospitality. as a traditional sector for Georgia, but recently booming in Georgia. We can say that we have from 15 to 20% growth in Georgia in tourism and hospitality, and it creates excellent opportunities for hospitality and hotel sector, since occupancy rates in Georgia are higher than 75% in major destinations like Tbilisi, capital of Georgia, and Batumi, which is a Black Sea coast country, which is becoming also as a business city recently. Other sectors, you can see industry is one of the main drivers of economic growth. Why? Because recently we signed deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with European Union, which not only lifts trade barriers for trade, but also eliminates institutional obstacles, since it envisages fundamental changes in institutions in Georgia and legislation, introducing new regulations, new standards for market economy institutions, such as competition agency, standardization, metrology, food safety, sanitary and phytosanitary standards. So Georgia is becoming European, but I should also say that Georgia positions to stay with the lighter regulations for the next decade. If you compare it to the typical European country, we need this flexibility in order to stay maybe more attractive for European investors and for other investors in the region. Other sectors, as you see, Georgia is a trade hub, and trade is important driver of GDP growth. Agriculture is one of the traditional sectors also with very good potential for growth. Next slide shows that Georgia's fiscal performance has been very prudent. We have a new president of National Bank here with more than 10 years of experience in IMF, seasoned finance professional. We are proud to have him back to Georgia, chairing the board of Central Bank of Georgia. And I should proudly say that our fiscal performance has been very prudent during the last years. We have managed to have public the deficit, fiscal deficit below 3.5% right now. We may increase the deficit up to 4% for the next several years, but it will stay within the prudent frames. We need more economic growth. We have ambitious plans to develop our infrastructure, and I will speak about it later. Our current account deficit is around 10% right now. It will decrease in the nearest future down to 8-9% in the next 4 or 5 years. And this deficit is mainly driven by large FDI inflows. The next slide shows again the monetary policy, and we were able to manage to keep very prudent monetary policy. We had very limited interventions during the last couple of years when we had depreciation of major currencies among our major trade partner countries. We managed to spare money, and now we have higher than 3 months of import foreign currency reserves, which shows very stable status for Georgia. And also inflation stays within the projected numbers. It's around 5% right now. And I should also say that we have very low inflation projected for the next year. It's around 3-4%. And let me move to the next slide. And you can see the pie chart, which shows the breakdown on foreign currencies in our foreign borrowing. Major currency is US dollars is 35%, euro is 16%, SDR, special drawing right, which we use from international financial institutions, is 45%. So it's quite diversified. And the domestic borrowing is 21%, and 73% of our external debt is sovereign debt. You can see that 24% is state-owned enterprises, and the remaining 3% is National Bank of Georgia borrowing. The external public debt service is absolutely affordable. The interest rate is lower than 2%, and debt payout ratios are very prudent. Now, on domestic market development, our goal is to develop local stock markets and local bond markets, and for this we are launching comprehensive capital market development project. And the third quarter of the next year, we will also launch the pension system reform, introducing second pillar of compulsory saving system, which on one hand will ensure better living standards for pensioners, but also on the other hand will create additional necessary liquidity, long-term investable resources in local currency, which will be absorbed by the local stock market. And not only, of course, there will be transactions abroad, investments abroad. Recently we had international financial institutions issuing local currency bonds, EBRD, IFC, ADB, Black Sea Trade and Development Bank, all of them issued local currency denominated bonds, and this is very important, and our aim is to increase internal borrowing also in order to diversify there. Now on the strong external sector, I already mentioned about foreign currency reserves, which stays above 3 months of import. Our current account deficit is around 11% right now, and it will decrease further. And our export structure, you can see the pie chart. In the export structure is the copper ore is the highest proportion, is ferroalloys, which is a traditional manufacturing in Georgia. We have motor vehicles. Georgia serves as a transit hub and re-export hub also for the region. We have agriculture share increasing. You can see that although wines was most traditional export item, now we have hazelnuts share increasing, and it's 2 times more now than our wine export, which is a sign of diversification of our export portfolio. Now on our open trade policy, we are the most open economy in the region. We have free trade agreements with all the European Union countries. We completed negotiations with EFTA countries, which is Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. So in a couple of months from now, they will be added to our free trade portfolio. We have free trade agreements with all the neighboring countries, including with Russia. We have trade with Russia, and also we are negotiating free trade with China, and hopefully end of this year we will have free trade agreement with China. So Georgia will have free trade agreements with 1/3 of the world population. So you can imagine that in this region, Georgia stays the most open economy, which is a very good prerequisite for establishing Georgia as a trade and transit hub in the region. And also we have a general system of preferences with the United States, Canada, and Japan, which is also very important. And we are considering possibility to plug into TTIP agreement, since we already have institutional arrangements with European Union countries. Now you can see that we have stable sovereign ratings from all major rating agencies. Standard & Poor's, Fitch rate Georgia at BB- with stable outlook, and Moody's BA3 with stable outlook. Resilient banking sector. I should admit that I am a little bit biased here with more than 13 years of banking experience, but I should say that Georgian banking sector is a champion, not only regionally, but in a wider region. We have one of the best technologies introduced in Georgian banking sector. We are proud to say that 2 of our largest banks are listed here in London. And despite all the challenges, you can see that non-performing loans ratio is decreasing. Despite all the challenges in the region, it's below 3% right now, and there is a decreasing trend downwards, which is really remarkable, which is, first of all, because of excellent management within the Georgian banks. This is because of excellent partnership agreements internationally, and also because excellent, prudent bank supervision from the central bank. And there was a discussion about separating bank supervision from the central bank, and we are very happy to say that bank supervision stays within the central bank, and it will remain so. This is institutionally very important. Now, FDI, which is a main driver of Georgia's economic growth, and I should say that in 2014 we had more than 80% growth of FDI. This was the highest number starting from 2006, and in 2015 it was down to 1.35 billion US dollar, but it was still the highest among the last 5 years. So FDI, this year we probably will end up with somewhere around 1.5 billion US dollar, which will be trend upward. But I can say that with our reform agenda, there will be more and more foreign direct investments, and we hope that in the next several years we will boost the FDI up to 2 billion US dollars in the next years. And what is the reason of this excellent outlook? First of all, this is political stability. I should say that despite all the political challenges in the region, despite territorial disputes with Russia, one of the biggest achievements for the government in the recent years was, on one hand, to stay very consistent with our agenda with the European Union, with NATO, and also, on the other hand, we were able to create, let me put this way, enough stability in the country to grow the economy, to grow the investments, and I think this is a remarkable achievement. We have business-friendly environment, one of the best rankings from reputable institutions. We have corruption-free public services, and I should say that yesterday I attended anti-corruption summit, and many of the items that are on the agenda of developed countries. For example, I can say that one of the items in communique that was to be accepted, and there was a big debate over this yesterday, it's too legal term, but non-convictional confiscation, where prosecutors can sue government officials, and government officials have a proof of burden to counter argument in the courts. So the prosecutors can initiate a civil lawsuit against government officials, and we already have it in our legislation, and it was very surprising for many of the European countries, by the way. And there are other issues with in anti-corruption achievements. We are very proud to say that Georgia is one of the least corrupt countries, not only in the region but in the world. And again, this is confirmed by reputable institutions such as Transparency International and others. We have one of the lowest crime rates. According to the recent surveys, Georgia is the sixth in the world with the lowest crime rate. And also we have free capital repatriation. We have very competitive cost of labor, relatively liberal labor legislation, which gives enough flexibility to employers, and improved access to finance with very well developed banking sector and developing capital market. Now, investment-friendly tax environment. We have for VAT, we have 6 types of taxes, and we are abolishing profit tax from the next year, where only distributed earnings will be taxed. So it is very liberal. We are 4th in the world with the least tax burden, as a least tax burden country, according to many international surveys, Forbes Tax Misery Index, and we are 9th in the world according to World Economic Forum ranking with the lowest taxes. Now, I already spoke about business environment in numbers. I can also say that according to world governance indicators in all areas like absence of violence, freedom of expression, regulatory quality, rule of law. Georgia has steady improvements during the last years from 10 to 15 percentile each year. Now this is our ambitious reform agenda, structural reforms, promoting open governance, promoting transit hub, and education reform. Let me just briefly say that our education reform will focus on the needs of the labor market, not only for today but for the next 5 years. Our open governance reform, which is very important, will introduce single window solution, one-stop shop solution for all legal entities in Georgia, so that companies will not be required to go to Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Energy, Natural Resources, Sovereign Fund. Everything will be in one space, and plus to that we are introducing e-governance services for everything. So this is a revolutionary change. We have already done that for the individuals. Many of those who visited Georgia recently can see the public service hall. By the way, it was done by the previous administration, and we appreciate that legacy. And now we are expanding the project in order to cover the needs of legal entities. I should also say that this will entail optimization in the back offices, so that back offices will be moved from the center of the city to free up space for hotels and offices. And also one important thing that I would like to mention as part of governance reform, we recently introduced Investor Council. It was initiated by EBRD and all major financial institutions, EBRD, World Bank, IFC, the local business associations, Chamber of Commerce, American Business Association, European. They sit, everybody, on this council. We have several ministers representing economic bloc of the cabinet, and Prime Minister is a chair. This is a platform for discussing all upcoming changes to regulations and legislation in order to avoid negative surprises for business community, for private sector, and to increase predictability for Georgia. Let me spare more time for our Q&A session, and this is Transit Hub, and I always say that in 5 years from now, we are aiming at finishing everything you see here. This is East-West Highway connecting Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Russia, North-South highways, roads connecting the central city, Kutaisi, with the South Georgia, and also, it's not here, but roads connecting main tourist destinations such as Svaneti here, and other major tourist destinations, and the road connecting Tbilisi with Azerbaijan towards east. So all this package should be completed in 5 years from now. And this is an excellent opportunity, and I have already discussed it with Makram and our Charlie and our colleagues from Barclays, and we are ready to discuss with all of you how to package this ambitious investment package, the project package, in order to attract more private investments. Because now, up till now, we were relying on sovereign funding. I think we need to shift the burden of financing from the sovereign balance sheet more to the private sector. So this is an excellent opportunity to sell bonds, to attract private funds in order to finance these very important, essentially important projects. We have several airports in Georgia. 2 of them, Tbilisi and Batumi, are run by a Turkish company. There is Kutaisi Airport, and by the way, Kutaisi, please pay attention that Kutaisi is operated by state-owned enterprise so far. Probably someday in the nearest future, we will put it on the concession. And there is low-cost flights operated from Kutaisi to Europe. Now we have several flights directly. It costs less than 100 euros to get from Georgia to Europe and back to Georgia. And from September of this year, we will open 8 more destinations to Europe. And Kutaisi will be very well connected within the country with all the major destinations, including the new port that will be constructed over here. This is an Anglia, several billion-dollar project which will increase Georgia's transit capacity up to 1 million tons a year. It will be done in several stages, and there will be several thousand square kilometers area of free industrial zone surrounding this new port. So that will be another driver of Georgia's economic growth for the next several years. Overall, I should say that what will be Georgia for 2020? This will be a country with very high growth rates. We aim at achieving from 7 to 8% growth rate in the next years, utilizing all the potential coming from free trade agreements, and plus to that free trade with China, Silk Road potential, new railway connecting Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, and via Turkey through Marmaray to Europe. New trains recently came from China to Georgia in 7 days, which means that from China via Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey or Black Sea to Europe, it takes only from 10 to 12 days to reach from China to Europe via Georgia and via South Caucasus. This is an excellent opportunity, and our aim is just to provide and to continue this very ambitious reform agenda to provide stability for the investors, and we are very strongly determined to continue this very successful track of the reforms. And Georgia will stay as an attractive place in not only South Caucasus but in the wider region to attract investments. By your private sector's participation is very important. This is a key, and our philosophy is, of course, to engage private sector in these development plans as much as possible. For this we have investment vehicles, we have sovereign fund, which is called Partnership Fund, which acts as minority investor up to 49% in these projects. We have private funds operating in Georgia, co-financing fund, and leaders and chairmen of these funds are here. We have Georgian Railway as a champion infrastructure project for Georgia, and utilizing full potential of Georgia's transit, Georgia's geographic location, and of course we have Georgian Oil and Gas Corporation. Also the management is here, CEO of this state-owned enterprise. So you are free to ask questions, but I'm here for the next 25 minutes to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your attention.